We have talked a lot about sexual misconduct over the past few weeks, harassment, assault, and worse, and with good reason. Almost every day since Harvey Weinstein, another woman has come forward with accusations about awful things that were said or done to them by men in positions of power, sometimes one time, sometimes repeatedly. Yesterday alone, accusations were levied against Democratic Congressman John Conyers of Michigan, producer Oliver Stone, Pixar co-founder John Lasseter, New York Times reporter Glenn Thrush. A second woman came forward with accusations that Democratic Senator Al Franken of Minnesota inappropriately touched her. And then there was Charlie Rose, who today was fired from CBS News, and his contract with PBS was terminated after the Washington Post reported 8 women who either worked with or wanted to work with Rose accused him of making, quote, unwanted sexual advances towards them, including lewd phone calls, walking around naked in their presence, or groping their breasts, buttocks, or genital areas. We should note, obviously, that WGBH was among the many PBS stations that aired The Charlie Rose Show up until last night, when the Post report came out and PBS stopped distribution. This afternoon, PBS made that move permanent, saying in a statement they expect all the producers they work with to provide a workplace where people feel safe and are treated with dignity and respect. And in a memo sent out a few hours earlier, CBS News announced their termination of Rose as a result of what they called the revelation of extremely disturbing and intolerable behavior. Rose also released a statement last night reading in part, I deeply apologize for my inappropriate behavior. I'm greatly embarrassed. I've behaved insensitively at times, and I accept responsibility for that, though I do not believe that all of these allegations are accurate. Unfortunately, Rose is just one of the latest in a very long line of men accused of sexual misconduct. So are we living through a game-changing time? Joining me to discuss are my Boston Public Radio co-host and Boston Globe columnist, Margery Eagan. Margery, great to see ya. And retired federal judge Nancy Gertner and professor at Harvard Law School. Judge, it's good to see you, too. Is this a game-changing time, or is it sort of Anita Hill, the sequel, meaning for a short period of time, right, everything changes and then it sort of settles back to where it was?
I'm not sure that it's a game-changer in this respect. These are all men whose currency is public relations. That is to say, where it matters that you make these kinds of accusations. So is that going to spill over to the foreman on the shop line? These are also all the kinds of accusations are not remotely subtle. Many of them feel like, you know, a functional equivalent of the guy on the subway who exposes himself. Yeah. And then the third thing is these are very unusual because it's not he said, she said. It's oftentimes he said, she said, she said, she said. So the question is, what's going to happen with people who aren't that prominent?
More nuanced.
Who have a more nuanced kind of accusation and without that kind of corroboration.
You're more optimistic than she is.
Well, you know, Judge Gertner makes a great point. I think the restaurant business that we've been hearing about, that this sexual harassment is rampant, and there's waitresses lots of times that aren't in power positions. There's no HR department at the little restaurant to deal with. I remember the Howard Johnsons, the last Howard Johnson, where they had 12 women or something that said that they were concerned about this. So that's a great point, but I do think in other areas, men are getting fired now. I covered the Anita Hill hearings, and I remember sitting there thinking, this woman is so credible, so dignified, so impressive, and then, of course, they all ignored her, and Clarence Thomas became the Supreme Court Justice.
Well, I'm sorry.
But now I think it's different because they're all losing their jobs.
Well, let me try to temper your optimism if I can. The President of the United States just spoke a few minutes ago for the first time substantively on Roy Moore. He denies it. This is the President speaking. He denies it. If you look at all the things that have happened over the last 48 hours, he totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And look, you have to look at him also, I assume meaning what kind of high-level character he has. How does that change the dynamic, if at all? Obviously, this guy being the president, accused by 12-plus women himself of sexual misconduct.
Well, I don't know why anybody believes anything Donald Trump says about anything anymore. And when he was accused by 12-plus women, I remember one time he said, look at that woman. Why would I ever sexually abuse her? It was so crass and horrifying. But, you know, I would not be surprised, and maybe I am being too optimistic, that some of these 12 women reemerge, re-interviewed. Let's get the further details of what went on.
With respect to Trump.
With respect to Trump. I would hope some reporters go after those women to re-air those stories.
Well, some people think there should be a recking, too, for somebody you know pretty well, the former President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
I'm not going to answer that question.
I knew you wouldn't.
But let's go to more. I mean, of all the accusations against all the men that we've seen over the past month, the ones against Moore are the very worst.
Because of the age of this?
Because of the age. And then in terms of what, these are not just accusations, there is corroboration here. There's corroboration about the people in the mall. There's corroboration about his coworkers. This is not, if Moore survives, then that will be very, very troubling.
So were you not answering the Clinton question then or ever?
No, I'll answer it. What do you want to answer?
Should people, everybody, New York Times, Atlantic, should there be a reckoning? Leon Panetta, former chief of staff, says, well, he was impeached. He had to go through all this. That was Monica Lewinsky. That was not about assaults that he's accused of.
I understand, but what's there to do with him?
I don't know.
I mean, in other words, this is not somebody you can fire. You can say that it was bad. It was bad.
Okay, well then, speaking of what you can do, you're the judge. You're the judge who used to sentence people. Margery and I were discussing this on and off the air. What's the punishment for these people? I think it was you who said to me the other day, or maybe it was me who said it to you, it's better to be Anthony Weiner and be charged, sentenced, and do your time, so when it's over, you can say, I did my time.
Well, that's actually...
What do these people do, serve lifetime sentences?
But it's very interesting. That's actually a very troubling issue. I have someone, I'm a Me Too person, too, and I have a Columbia law professor that I want very much to out. And I'm struggling because we're talking about accusations from 40 years ago, which there's no setting in which to adjudicate. There's no setting in which to defend
just say it and let him deal with the consequences of it?
You know, the civil...
You want to say it now?
No, the civil libertarian in me is still troubled.
So what is... But let's...
Because there's no way to defend yourself. There's no way to defend themselves.
There are degrees, and again, even
there
the
are
most...
degrees, and that's very important.
But let's assume someone's in the middle, whatever that means. Does that mean you can never work again? Does that mean
right.
What is it? What's the? How do you decide what the quote punishment
we are
is?
not looking. The concept is proportionality. Should it be the same kind of response to Roy Moore, who's talking about being a child predator, as someone like Al Franken? Putting aside the politics, Franken was messing around with a skit with a comedy writer. I mean, it seems to me that there's a difference in proportionality. But right now we only have one response, which is to throw the book at them. That's right. No, I agree with you. I think that this is troubling. And then the question is, what's the reaction going to be? And I worry about the reaction.
The backlash.
Yes.
Since you were a judge, what I would have said in addition to that, it also matters. Can I speak for you in this particular case? It also matters if you acknowledge your sins, your wrongdoing. Here's part of, I thought, the pathetic statement.
The people that deny are the ones that are getting away with it.
But here's Charlie Rose. I also felt I was pursuing shared feelings when I opened my robe and had nothing on underneath it. He didn't say it. Even though I now realize it was a mistake. And all of us, including me, are coming to a newer and deeper recognition of the pain caused by...
This is the Weinstein defense.
And have come to a profound new respect for women and their lives. Talk about condescension and arrogance.
But that's also the Weinstein defense.
I know
it was never, ever appropriate to masturbate in front of a woman. It was never appropriate to open up your robe. This was never. You're talking about behavior that is so far beyond the past.
But should a sincere, I guess what I would say, a sincere, unequivocal apology should matter.
But that's not even sincere.
Well, it doesn't.
Oh, I know.
It doesn't matter because, as I just said, Roy Moore's denying, the president's denying, and they're surviving. The thing I do worry about is the awkward, clumsy, gross pass that some men are. They're not trying to sexually harass you. They think this is how you begin a relationship.
Bad behavior, not a...
And so if someone says stop, you stop. You don't want those people to get caught up in sexual harassment.
That's right. There's a sort of continuum of conduct here. And at one end is really Moore and, sadly, Charlie Rose. And at the other end is what the awkward pass is the comment that shouldn't be made.
Can I add one more set of people to this discussion? Is defenders. Several dozen women who worked at SNL did essentially a character reference in the last 24 hours for Al Franken. By the way, they didn't say he didn't do it. They did a character reference. Unlike Lena Dunham, who, until she flipped, basically said the accuser in this case, who I think was 17 years old at the time, not only did she vouch for the credibility of her former colleague, but I think that woman was one of the 3% who misreported or something, basically saying, not blaming, but saying the accuser is not credible. What should happen to those people? I don't mean sentencing. What should happen to those people?
Which people? The false accusers?
Well, either character references as of SNL or a Lena Dunham who knows nothing about what actually happened.
Lena Dunham is a different kind of thing than SNL. SNL goes to the proportionality issue. So you can be. So it was not unusual when someone was before me in a criminal case that they would say this is an aberrant act. This didn't define who I was before. That didn't define who I was afterwards.
But didn't deny that they did it.
Didn't deny that they did it. So the question is, do we treat the person for whom this is an aberrant act the same as someone who routinely does it throughout his entire career over a period of time?
Well, what do you say, though, about a Lena Dunham who doesn't just give a character reference a la SNL, but basically not only vouched for her former colleague,
right.
but went on to say, I don't think the other woman is credible, even though she knows nothing
right. I mean, that's
about
right.
You've got to be very careful giving character references because often you have no idea. I mean, I've often been shocked by someone that I thought was an upstanding person, then all of a sudden I realize that that person is not. So you often don't know that this is going on even around you.
But the SNL women were saying, this is our interaction with him, and we saw none of it.
Not suggesting that the things didn't happen. Right.
That's right. Just saying that in the larger... But that goes to your other point about proportionality, which is, will we look at the goof, the mistake, the aberrant conduct, the 4 week, even the 4 week period when he was, on drugs or something like that, or do you and treat that differently than the person who was absolutely making a habit of this over a period of time?
Would anybody surprise? Is there a man you can think of who's high profile who, if tomorrow you woke up and his face was on the front of the New York Times, the Washington Post, you'd say, that one shocks me? Is there anybody?
I'd be shocked.
No, I'm serious. Anybody who's really... Nobody. Oh, but me, thank you very much. Is there? Yeah. Okay, one last thing before you go. We got a call today from a woman. I don't mean to attack. My apologies if you're watching. Sarah from Newton, who said, you know what the horrible part of this is going to be? Men are not going to know what to say anymore. What do they say to a... You look great, Margery. Judge Gertner, you look terrific.
That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. Right. Because this is a certain sort of thing that certain small numbers of men do. The vast majority of men I know would never in their life dream of doing this kind of thing. And the people that do it, there's a humiliation factor there. Right. There's a shame factor.
This is also weird sex. I mean, some of the stuff about Weinstein and the stuff, with Charlie Rose is weird stuff.
Yeah.
It's not... it's what is it? A ceremony of degradation? It's very
different.
It is.
That is a great...
It's a ceremony of degradation, and men know, and it's not ambiguous. What this woman is suggesting is that there's some ambiguity. These are ceremonies of degradation.
You also wonder, I mean, what does someone like Charlie Rose think? He's 75. These women are 25. He's going to come out from the shower.
Okay, let's leave it there. Thank you very much. Margery,
and they're going to say, wow.
Margery, I'm shaking your hand. I'll see you tomorrow at 11. Thank you, Judge Gertner. It's great to see you, as always. Thank you both.